The state of the state better than 4 years ago.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
I think governors and presidents have done a great job of corrupting the concept of state of the union and state of the state. I don't need to hear a report measured on how you think your report card is going. If you want to talk to us about what the state of the state is, okay. You want to give us an objective report on it? Awesome. You want to measure everything on what you've done and your 4 years? It's a political speech, in part. So, you can call it the governor's presentation on how good I've done. But, you know, come on, man. Anyway, nice to have you aboard. I don't know if Ted or Joe will buy into that, but it doesn't matter. It's my doggone show. Great to have you in. You know, I just wanted to mention this. I must have an edge today. I don't know. I've been running like crazy. I'm usually much nicer. So, we have some throat clearing problems around here. I don't know what that's all about. But think about this. New York Times is talking about the president pulling us out of NATO. That's no big deal, right? We probably nominating an attorney general who will not recuse. That's fairly controversial. We've got a thing called a shutdown in day 26 and a border wall battle, and Britain's blown up over Brexit. But who cares? Let's talk about Rhode Island. Here was Eyewitness News report on the speech last night.
State of our state is strong. It is much stronger than it was 4 years ago, and our future depends on the decisions that we make today together.
Governor Gina Raimondo's State of the State touting progress made on unemployment, roads, and school repairs. But the second-term governor says there is still plenty of work to do. First, on education.
Those recent test scores are not acceptable, not good enough for our kids. We have lagged behind our neighbors for far too long.
Raimondo pledging to invest an additional $30 million in local schools and bring universal pre-K to the state by the end of her term. For students on the other end of their educational careers, she proposes an expansion of the Promise Scholarship, which currently offers 2 free years of tuition at CCRI.
So this year, I propose we expand what's working. I propose we expand the Promise to Rhode Island College to cover the last 2 years of a 4-year degree at Rhode Island College.
She says she hopes to do the same at URI by the end of her term. She also pledges to expand her Real Jobs Rhode Island training program and up the minimum wage.
Tonight I say let's raise it again this year to $11.10, which will put us on a path to $15 an hour and allow us to keep up with our neighbors in Massachusetts and Connecticut.
After the speech, Republicans like Representative Brian Newberry questioned how the state will afford the governor's plans.
I heard a lot of great ideas on how to spend the people's money, some of which are good, some of which are not, but I don't know where the money's going to come from.
Nobody does. The Speaker doesn't. The Senate President doesn't. I have copious amounts of audio that I played earlier today on the radio. Weekdays 3 to 6 on WPRO, where the Speaker's like, yeah, I don't know. Senate President's like, I don't know. I got one rep who comes up to me. He will remain nameless. He comes up to me. He says, "Hey, here's the text I sent to the Speaker during the show. Where's the money coming from?"
The same rep did the same thing to me.
Starts with a and ends with a you know. But I'm like, okay, really? Unless there's 2 reps texting the Speaker
Could be.
at the same time. Thanks for joining us, guys. The broad concept, the takeaway, obviously there's a heavy emphasis on education. We'll dig into that. But what's the broad concept you bring from this evening's or last night's kind of presentation?
Well, I had kind of my political takeaway and my policy takeaway. My political takeaway was I do think the governor is clearly just in stronger command in a couple ways. She's clearly more comfortable. I think just the way she delivered the speech, she was riffing a lot more off of her prepared remarks in a way she didn't used to do. Also, I think I think she's sort of become much more of a sort of normal Democrat. You know, she came into politics with the pension law, something a lot of Democrats had misgivings about. Over time, she's doing more and more things that make a lot of people in that room happy, since it's overwhelmingly Democratic lawmakers, and that just gives a different feel to the whole thing. On policy, you know, I think they are putting it all in the framework of preparing and positioning Rhode Island for the future, for economic shocks if there's a recession. And I think the big question is, you know, when the actual numbers come out tomorrow, Thursday, are the trade-offs, which she didn't talk about last night, going to be the right ones? You know, if there was unlimited funds, I think a lot of this stuff would pass very easily. But what do you have to cut, and what do you have to do to get the money to do what she wants?
Joe?
No, I agree. She's a lot better now than she was 4 years ago. She comes across really explaining what she wants to do. The question is there resources to do what she wants to do? She gave a really great speech last night, talked a lot about social issues that Democrats really like, and the chamber's all Democrats pretty much. The question is there money to do these programs? And that we're not going to find out until tomorrow.
Why bother? If you're not coming with a prepared economic analysis or budgetary presentation that is the underlying foundation of that which you are conceptually offering, why bother?
I would assume she's going to show in the budget there's money for these programs. I mean, you're supposed to have a balanced budget every year in the state of Rhode Island. She's going to show there's money for these programs. The question is, will the General Assembly use that money for those programs, or will they change it to some things for their own pet projects? But I think in the budget it's going to show there's probably greater revenue from the state income tax, state sales tax, possibly internet gambling if they go that route. That could already be in the budget for all we know. But there's a lot of expenses, the education, the car tax. She has to have a balanced budget tomorrow.
I think to your point about the way the state of the state is today, the way the State of the Union is today, if there's one after the announcement this morning by Pelosi, you know, I think we have a very executive-focused politics nowadays in America, even more I think than we used to. And legislatures just wait. Look at the shutdown. I mean, the Congress could just pass something on the shutdown among themselves and let the president decide. But you hear the Republicans in the Senate saying, "We are waiting for the president to tell us what to do, and then we'll do that." And I think in Rhode Island too. I mean, the governor. The thing is, the governor gets every governor, Kucheri, Chafee, Raimondo, gets a lot of what they ask for in the budget. Some things we don't even report on a lot. And this sort of, in both cases, kind of kicks off the discussion. And part of the upside of being the governor or the president is you get to set the terms of the discussion, and you know, it's the old bully pulpit thing. And I think that's what they're using it for in these January speeches every year.
Yeah, and that's fine. I guess there's just kind of a, you know, calendar pomp and circumstance that's necessary to kick the year off. But I don't know. The one thing about this governor that I have noticed over time is that she has become more relaxed in her own skin, which is telling me that she is truly becoming a mercenary, because she is calculating, and she's comfortable with that. Everything is calculated now, and nothing is all chips in, the likes of which she showed when she was treasurer and she went for pension reform. When you say she's becoming more of that Democrat, I think you're absolutely on the money, and I think it's also reflecting in her way of doing business. I had a fascinating conversation on the radio today with Ricardo Pitts-Wiley, who runs the Mixed Magic Theater, a real big guy on the arts and education and the like. He was on the TV show last week talking about his presentation for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. But his reaction to the speech was mine, which is, I just want someone to really go all in and stand for something. And even the education thing, as you point out so well, Ted, which we'll talk about next, which is the dominant message last night, it's still tepid. And throwing $30 million on it doesn't make it less tepid.
No.
You know, where's the emotion? Where's the anger translated to productivity? Where's the embarrassment? Where's the hey, over my dead body, are we going to continue to fail? I don't hear that.
Well, I think she did go all in 4 years ago on economic development. That was her big thing. This
Picking
first 4
winners
years.
and losers. Right. To her credit, she steadfast to that.
Yes, she did. That's what I'm saying.
I don't think that helps us.
Well, I mean,
overall.
Basically, unemployment was very high when she became the governor. Now the unemployment is a lot lower.
Yeah, by coincidence, that's the same thing going on in the United States.
Yes, I understand that. Yeah. I understand that. But I mean, she went all in on the economic development. That was her whole campaign for 4 years. bringing jobs into Rhode
And
Island.
I think Joe's right. I think, you know, they have had to fight hard behind the scenes to preserve those programs at times. There's been opposition in the Assembly, not just from conservatives, also from some Democrats. At times, Speaker Mattiello has sounded skeptical, and there's been,
You're talking about the economic development
yes,
stuff,
I've
right?
watched Seven Parliament. So I think Joe is right that, you know, if you want to look for a place where she has gone all in, it's on, whether you support them or not, her vision of what the economic development policy framework should be in Rhode Island.
All right. Well, right now we are in triage need for education. We got a commissioner on the way out. We got remember the old game show? You're not old enough, you old pipsqueak. But Fleming and I certainly are. Remember the old the Tell the Truth?
Yes.
When they would stand up, sit down,
Yep.
stand up, sit down.
Yep.
We had a little bit of that last night. We'll show you that when we come back. Stay with us.
So this year, I propose we expand what's working. I propose we expand the promise to Rhode Island College to cover the last 2 years of a 4-year degree at Rhode Island College.
Well, our Friday show guest loved that. Here comes Dr. Sanchez. There's a guy sitting down there.
Before these 4 years are out, let's expand the promise to our flagship university, University of Rhode Island.
Oh, okay. But the flagship certainly doesn't want to play second fiddle. And so that's the tell the truth. There's Megan Hughes, and she's up, and Sanchez from Rick is up, and Dooley's like, you know what?
Picture's worth 1,000
I don't
words.
feel like getting up. Reaction to now another few $4 or $5 million reportedly into Rick to
3.3.
yeah, a few 4 or 5, like I said. She keeps pecking away at this Rhode Island Promise thing. I think the concept is ill thought out, but what do you think about the way she went about it last night?
Well, I think she wants to expand it, obviously, to adults at CCRI and move it to Rick. But again, that's the last resort, the Rhode Island Promise, to keep in mind. If you apply to CCRI and you're eligible for a Pell Grant, you get that before the Rhode Island Promise. But I think it helps more middle-class people in the state of Rhode Island than it does low-income, because a lot of the low-income people in Rhode Island would get the Pell Grant. With the middle class, the family that's making $60,000, $70,000, you know, they may not be able to afford the $5,000.
That's actually a good point by Joe, too, because sometimes when you talk to the folks who support these kind of free tuition programs, they talk about it almost as much as a marketing tool, as an actual financing of college tool, and that they say, putting it out there, this is free, gets a lot more kids to apply who might already have been eligible for enough financing, but just assume because of their own circumstances they aren't. I'm not saying if that's a good reason to do it, but you hear that often, that it makes people who might not otherwise think they are college material or college financially try it out and learn that there's all these programs for them. And I think that's a significant part of why the governor is so into this.
But she never articulates that argument.
I think it's a good argument she should talk about, you know, how it's helping the middle class and it's bringing more people into the colleges. I know at CCRI, the Pell Grant numbers have gone up big time since they started the Promise program, because some people are coming in for the Promise program and they find that they're eligible for the Pell Grants, so they're getting the Pell Grants. So, I mean, there's benefits, and I think that, you know, we have to wait a few years to see how this works out. But again, it's costing money. And again, the General Assembly put restrictions on it 2 years ago when it started. If they expand to Rick, do they have the same restrictions or more restrictions even?
Well, you know, I'm really bullish on the college institutions here in Rhode Island. I think even Rick probably is in the sweet spot of the most return on investment that you could find anywhere.
Right.
It's a quality education, and the tuition comparatively is still very modest. URI, I think, stands in a great position. I'm a URI dad, and yeah, I wrote all those checks, and I still think that there's an argument to be made that if there's a value to something, you should put a price tag on it.
As a graduate of both schools, I agree.
And I just, and the idea that she's now going to try to piecemeal this thing, I'm guessing Dr. Dooley is looking like he's a little miffed, not because she's looking to expand the program, because he supported it vehemently at
Right.
the beginning, but that he's not included in this budget proposal.
What also throws off, my understanding is that
I mean, that's my assumption.
I remember hearing from other people's reporting, candidly Dan McGowan, my colleague who does education, that there have been concerns at the other two institutions about how this reshapes enrollment trends and could destabilize their finances. So for Rick, maybe a student who would have enrolled toward a 4-year degree initially says, wait a minute, CCRI 2 years is free? I'll go to CCRI free for 2 years, and then I'll switch to Rick. Well, suddenly Rick's enrollment numbers are down in those first 2 years because you have kids going to Rick, or maybe better students that you would have wanted to have at Rick already are going over at CCRI because of the money. And then again, for URI now, they could be looking at a similar thing where could this be drawing people to Rick who might have gone to URI and throwing off kind of the mix they were looking for?
All right, let's talk about education in general and wrap this. Remember, most recently in the last couple of months, the Ed Commissioner was here and took me up on a suggestion. There are coaches who believe that you go into the locker room and you hold carrots until you get performance. And then there's Bobby Knight who comes in and throws chairs and tells them the truth. I just want you to throw a chair once.
Yeah.
I just want you to throw a chair once. I want people to understand that this isn't funny, this isn't acceptable, and it's not true that our kids perform.
This isn't funny, this isn't acceptable, and it's not true that our kids can't do it. They can do it.
Yeah. I caught up with the commissioner in the hallway last night after the address and just checked in with him. Public radio is reporting that within a few weeks there'll be an announcement for his replacement. He tells me, not on tape, but for the record, because I asked him, what can I report out to the public? He tells me, you should know that the average stay for an ed commissioner is a couple of years. 2, I need to protect the work that we're doing here, so I'm still invested. 3, no, I'm not being forced out. And 4, this is just part of the cycle. So I got a clear picture that he is on his way out. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I asked the governor's office last month as these rumors started to circulate, you know, or maybe it was early this month, excuse me, you know, hey, all over the State House that Wagner's on his way out, something's coming. And the quote I got back was, we have no personnel announcements to make at this time. If you are trying to knock down, you know, if I asked if Secretary Pryor's on his way out, I'd get a statement of, the governor has full confidence in Secretary Pryor, he's doing a great job, she loves having him. You know what I mean? It's a non-denial denial, as they say.
But I think he's trying to make it clear. He was trying to make it clear to me that he's not being pushed out. He may have. Joe, you've been here a long, long time.
Yep.
There's a culture here. We don't like new people coming in telling us what to do with our education, and you know we don't like the fact that they come in and they leave. That we have since Deb Gist at least, after McWalters was here about 17 years. But Deb Gist is in and out. This guy is in and out. The next person likely will be in and out. What sticks?
Well, that's the problem, Dan. I spent 33 years in education as a teacher and as an administrator. What I find is every 4 or 5 years, there's a change in the system. Something's changing. As a result, you can't get the same thing going along, and you're always going back to the beginning. That seems to be the problem. The governor was right last night. They keep changing in midstream.
But Massachusetts was able to get a consistent model. It was led by Bill Weld early on, and Governors Cellucci and
Swift, and then Romney, and then Patrick, and now Baker.
The whole crowd.
If I remember correct, at the beginning, the math scores were very low also. It took many years. Rhode Island has to give it time to move up. What Rhode Island seems to do is, after 4 or 5 years, just go back and start over.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the Massachusetts school system during the time they were going through that. That's when I was in school. And I remember as a kid, I didn't understand necessarily the politics of it, but there was heavy pressure to, you know, turn back on the MCAS test, which is now what we use as the RICAS test in Rhode Island. And you know, I might not have liked it as the kid taking the test, but they stuck with it. It was made clear that, no, you're going to have to pass this. I think my graduating class in 2003 in high school was one of the first ones that needed to pass the test to graduate. And there was, you know, it did send a message because there was pressure and they stuck with it. So I think, you know, I don't know enough to know for sure that exactly which policies worked in Massachusetts, but I know as a student who was in the system, it sent a message when they stuck with it.
I think it's starting to resonate. Just copy Massachusetts. You know, where the variables may exist, you know, dot an I and cross a T. But just take the format and let it be. Gary Sass from Bryant, former director of administration, RIPEC, all of that. We'll have to have him in too. Makes a good point. Every educational turnaround in America has been the responsibility, the productivity, and the success story of the governor of that state. Not the ed commissioner hire, but the governor of that state. This is on her right now, right?
This may be what she's going for the next 4 years. First 4 years was economic development. These 4 years may be education.
Well,
trying to begin to turn it around.
I have to see more vigor. I got to see more vim and vigor. Throwing 30 million here and blah, 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 and just saying, hey, listen, we're behind and we're a little tired of it. That's not enough.
No, there has to be more to it than just throwing 30 million.
Well, you also need buy-in. I mean, you need
consensus from the ground up in this state from people.
You do.
They need to be as upset or more upset and drive it. Are you upset? Because if you're not upset,
why did the lawmakers? I think there was a bipartisan vote to either freeze or what was it a couple years ago where the test was going to be a graduation requirement, and they suddenly put that on hold.
Right.
And
there goes Deb Gist out the door.
Well, and I think, when that happened, that was the lawmakers saying, look, we're hearing this from our constituents, they don't want it. I think, I would never dismiss any governor's need to lead and use the bully pulpit, but also you do need kind of a consensus in the state on the need to do more. I don't know where that comes from.
Okay, there were some predictable remarks last night and then something missing. Stay with us. This was missing. A projection of $14.5 gross million in 2020 fiscal year was missing. Why was marijuana missing? We only have a minute. What do you think?
I asked our advisors after. They certainly talked a lot about whether to include it, but they don't want people to think the governor is enthusiastic about legalizing marijuana. They firmly see it as our hands being forced in Rhode Island by Massachusetts and Connecticut. And this was a speech about the things she does want to do and does think are positives and helpful. She sees that as more a downside risk protection.
The pollsters polled it. Throw that up if you get a chance. Well, Joe, you're respecting.
Yeah, we found 56% of Rhode Islanders favored recreational marijuana for people over the age of 21. So I think she's on a track where the majority of Rhode Islanders support it. But I agree with Ted. It's not a top priority for her. It's way down the list. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, oh well.
Yeah, and I don't think she's done a lot of diligence on it. Tomorrow we have the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association who take umbrage with the rollout of the idea over the past weekend. And the Speaker and the Senate President was talking to me about the money. He likes the money, but the Speaker is kind of like, I have no idea, right?
Yeah, and
predictions, will that happen for fiscal 2020?
I genuinely don't know. I don't know. They did say, one of the governor's aides said to me last night, he's like, we're already being affected in Rhode Island by legalization in Massachusetts, things happening over the border. They think they're already seeing effects, and they said, we need, frankly, some more resources to deal with that, and they think they can control their own destiny, is what they say, if they have a framework here.
10-second summation on the night.
I think she had a good night. However, I think we have to wait till tomorrow to find out where the resources are coming from to pay for these programs. If there's not enough money there, some of these programs are not going to happen this year.
And
I would agree with that. I think I want to see the numbers. Right. That was a nice speech. I know what she wants, but I want to see how she's paying for it.
You might as well be the Senate President. You might as well be the Speaker, because they were saying the same thing to me last night.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Always appreciate your expertise. Final word when we come back. So yes, on the legalization of recreational marijuana, there are all sorts of stakeholders and people who have to execute the plan, including law enforcement. The Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association executive director will be here tomorrow night to express some of the concerns they have had as they wedge their way into the dialogue with the governor. And we'll keep track of everything else that's going on with that budget number to attach to the concepts of the state of the state, which is a how am I doing speech, and you know it. See you on the radio 2 at 3 on WPRO. Thanks for tuning in. Good night.